Hello and welcome back to the County Chat channel. Today we are doing our Division 1 update show as we've been doing through the season of the County Championship. We'll be going through doing a bit of general news, sort of updates, if you will, talking about the results from the last 2 weeks, any sort of key notable fixtures, and then we'll be going through picking out standout team from the last 2 weeks, our standout bowler, batter and all-rounder from the past weeks. And then the most important bit, and the bit I love the most, building what is the County Chat 12. So we go through a kind of all-star team that runs through the season. So it's kind of, you get some continuity from just how you've done earlier on the season. But of course, you get some changes with players getting into form, losing form, so on and so forth. But without further ado, we'll kick ourselves off with the general news aspect of the show. There wasn't a massive amount of Division 1 news. I mean, obviously, attached to England cricket, someone like Gus Atkinson playing for Surrey whilst England have a test match, I think was obviously a surprising thing. But, you know, aside from the fact that he bowled quite well, not actually a huge amount to mention there. And obviously Ben Stokes playing for Durham is in Division 2, so we'll get on that in the Division 2 weekly update, or bi-weekly update, as I've been calling them. So anyway, the Mason Crane, I would say, was one of the cooler stories. His batting has been a bit of a story of this season in a way. As he's been, throughout his career, I would say, not known for his batting. He's a leg spinner who was not known as being even vaguely an all-rounder, arguably very much a tail-ender. And then this season, his batting's taken a real step in the right direction, if you're a Glamorgan fan or a Mason Crane fan, or Mason Crane himself. And yeah, he literally, he got onto and he batted beautifully and really, really diligently. I think it was like 99 off like 200 and something balls, like a really hard-fought knock, and got out bowled. And any bowler who, I'm sure, who plays first-class cricket, but any bowler who plays any level of cricket, if you get in and you get into the 90s, you are dying to get that 100. And him getting out on 99 was pretty heartbreaking to watch, to be honest. He really fell on his bat. He couldn't believe what he'd just done. Anyway, the reason this is on the news this time, because we're not talking about the 99 out, he scored his maiden first-class 100 in the last 2 weeks, which is just obviously a brilliant sort of story, a really wonderful moment for him. And yeah, it was just a real beautiful moment of relief, you could tell, when he scored the run that took him there. It really, you really could tell it meant something to him. And it's always nice moments like that of, cricketers, seizing a moment when they've been in a good era of batting. So yeah, he scored 106 this time, 234 balls in the first innings of a really, really impressive and important victory for Glamorgan over Surrey. We're obviously skipping a little bit ahead to the fixtures and results bit there. But yeah, just for Mason Crane, it was a really lovely moment and a really wholesome bit of cricket. And in sort of the same breath, I guess, but slightly more bleak for if you're a Leicestershire fan. But Leicestershire at home against Yorkshire, absolutely hammers Yorkshire. Win by an innings. But if you've been following the County Championship Division 1 so far this season, Leicestershire, a newly promoted side, had been in Division 2 for quite an extended period of time. And they'd started the season poorly. This was their first win of the season, and what that meant by it was that the fact that it was their first win of the season meant that it was their first win in the top flight of county cricket since 2003. Which is a remarkably long period of time. That's 23 years. I was born in 2002. So for someone like me, that's just like an entire lifetime that Leicestershire have sort of either not been in Division 2. I don't know if they've been in Division 1 and literally had seasons where they didn't win any games. Someone who's maybe a bit even more of a badger than I am, or a little bit older than I am, maybe able to tell me that. But for my knowledge, they've been a Division 2 county kind of as long as I've been cognizant of the county championship. And yeah, I saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, how depressing!" I saw there was a comment, County Championship posted it, and a lot of comments being like, "Oh, how depressing is this for the county game?" And I was thinking, it's kind of the opposite. Imagine if like a team, I don't know, you hadn't been in the Premier League for 30 years, and they finally got a win. You wouldn't be saying, "Oh, how depressing is it that they've only just got into the Premier League?" I don't know. Or they've just got their win in the Premier League. I don't know. Maybe it's just a perception of cricket, and maybe it's just because there's two divisions. Who knows? But I thought really cool moment. It was kind of a game and a kind of a prototype of a game that I was expecting Leicestershire to have a lot more of, a kind of lots of bowling options, batting depth where you have batting depth. And I do think they've really missed Rian Ahmed, and he was a huge part of this win. He scored 100. And Rian Ahmed, everyone knows how great and talented of a cricketer he is. I think they've missed him dearly, and I think it was a really clear moment of him being back in the side, and it looked like exactly how the Leicestershire team should sort of set up. And their bowling, unfortunately, just hasn't played all that well in Division 1. So that's kind of been their issue for the season. But again, at the end of the day, a little bit of a silver lining to the cloud, if you will, of them being able to, get their first win on the board, and maybe they can start making a bit of a Great Escape comeback story. Obviously, more likely they might continue in the sort of the trend they've been going, but at least they would have had their first win of the season. Right, as I start screen sharing, I feel I must need to say that this is being recorded, as you can imagine, on probably the hottest day of the year so far in the UK. So if you're watching live and not listening on the podcast, I am literally just glistening with sweat. So apologies for that. Anyway, now we've got onto some screen sharing for those who, again, aren't listening on the podcast, but we will be going through the results of the last 2 weeks. Right, yeah, so the first game was of this sort of week of games was a bit earlier than the others. Surrey played Hampshire on a kind of one-off fixture because that basically this was at the Oval and England were playing at the Oval, so it made a lot of sense that Surrey had to play this game sooner, basically. Not much to write home about. It was a fairly good wicket. I think there was a bit of rain around, if my memory serves. But basically, neither team ever looked like losing. I mean, Surrey were probably we're definitely in the driving seat of the fixture. But 420 plays for 330. Surrey declare, and Hampshire batted out for 101 for 2. So that was a draw there. And then we had the sort of next round of fixtures, which was sort of more typical. Yorkshire put themselves in a very good position to win at home, but at Scarborough, at their outground there. But yeah, unfortunately for Yorkshire, couldn't get over the line. They were still needing 2 wickets, with Warwickshire just about batting out for a draw. 333 for 8, Warwickshire were, whilst chasing 453. So basically, sort of, Yorkshire ran out of time on what was clearly a fairly good surface for batting. Essex beat Leicestershire at Leicester. Very much a good first inning score, and then a bit of a sort of maybe an encapsulation of Leicester's season. The batting just, the bowling can restrict them to a smaller score, and then the batting didn't stand up to it. They got bowled out in the first innings for 187, got followed on, then batted very well in the second innings, but it just wasn't quite enough runs. I believe that was the innings where Jordan Cox came back into the Essex side and scored a massive total of runs in that first inning. So you could arguably look at it as like, one player just made a big difference between the two sides, because Cox is one of that level of player. And then Glamorgan played at Hove against Sussex and got beaten very heavily by Sussex. An innings win there. Just as simple as it was one of those. It was quite one-sided, really, as Glamorgan got bowled out early, 155. Sussex put up a very, very big score. James Coles, again, sort of speaking of a player being maybe just, obviously being man of the match, but being a player really stepping the head above the parapet. Coles had a bad season to start the year with his bat, and I think he scored double 100, pretty much runnable, pretty massive. Now, the biggest sort of result of this week of fixtures, sort of June 12th to June 15th, as they say there, was Somerset beating Nottinghamshire, but at Nottinghamshire. Somerset have been in and around the title race, and I think this put them right in and amongst it. They did very, very well, and quite comprehensively beat Nottinghamshire. Nottinghamshire have been excellent champions, and they're currently still top of the league. But Somerset went to their place, put together some big innings. Thomas Rue scored runs. And then this by wickets, sort of by committee. I will click on the fixture because, as I say, if you're talking about a standout fixture probably from the last few weeks, this was it. Yeah, Jordan Herman, of course, came in and scored 100. And then, Rue got runs in the first innings, as did Archie Vaughan. Then wickets for Gregory, 3 for Leach, couple for Craig Overton, who's having a remarkable season that we'll get onto in a minute. And then Thomas Rue, as I say, scored 100 in the second dig, which was set them up for a position to win. And I think, wickets for Craig Overton in that second innings, 29 for 5 for him to take Somerset to a very handy win, or not even a handy win, a huge win, really, for the Southwest County. Anyway, on to the sort of the round of fixtures that have just finished. So if you're really into county cricket, it would be sort of fresh in your mind. Nottinghamshire bounced back as a champion team. You'd hope they would. And they went to Chelmsford, often referred to as Fortress Chelmsford, so on and so forth. And Nottinghamshire absolutely hammered Essex. And Essex's home form has actually kind of faltered in recent years. And I keep using the phrase Fortress Chelmsford, but I must admit it's becoming less of a thing, and as much as it was a thing in the sort of early 2020s and late 2010s in county cricket. But again, another sort of just fundamental hammering. I think Jack Haynes scored 100 even, but an innings victory. Nottinghamshire's bowling looked brilliant. Liam Patterson-White, his left arm spin, I mean, to me, I think now Liam Dawson's retired, I think he should be the England spinner. I'm totally sold on him, how he's been playing this season. Kind of bowling all-rounder, and his batting hasn't even really been doing much this season, but his bowling is really, really impressive, to the extent of which he basically out-bowled Simon Harmer in this fixture, and it was a pitch where it was taking spin. I think he took 6 for in one of the first innings, and then their third innings, if you will, he was just holding down an end and got 3 for as well. So it was a really, really big performance for him. As I mentioned in the kind of news aspect of it, Leicestershire's big win at home against Yorkshire. Rian Ahmed got runs. He also got a couple of wickets, and then it was a bit of a share of wickets. Ben Green was captaining the side, and he got some wickets, as he has been kind of all season, really. Glamorgan winning at home to Surrey was a really big moment. They followed on Surrey. And then Surrey, Rory Burns scored a second innings 100 to set up the game, and sort of the resilience that a team like Surrey often show. But Glamorgan just had enough in the tank to win by 7 wickets after following them on, after getting them all for 105. And again, Alex Norton took 5 for his first of his career, which I'm sure will be the first of many. Sussex, unfortunately, as a Sussex fan, got beaten by the local rivals Hampshire at home. Low-scoring fixture. I was working all this weekend, so I actually didn't really see much of these fixtures. And usually I'd be watching the Sussex game, so I couldn't really comment on if Sussex's batting was poor or if Hampshire's bowling was just that good. I do know for a fact that Carl Abbott had even for Carl Abbott, a ridiculous game. He had match figures of 9 for 54, and in the second innings bowled something like 15 overs, 3 wickets for 6 runs. So he was like an economy of like 0.5 and an average of 2, which is not bad going, and then he got 6 bag in the first innings. So yeah, sort of Carl Abbott doing Carl Abbott things, and maybe it was as simple as that. And then Somerset played Warwickshire, having had their massive win at Nottinghamshire. They were actually on the back foot the whole time whilst being at home, but a huge partnership between Thomas Rue and Craig Overton put sort of in the position where basically Warwickshire ended up having to block out for the draw rather than being in a position where they could get into a position where they might chase 314. They ended up on 98 for 2, and that's all the fixtures for this kind of 2-week period, if you will. Some really, really excellent games of cricket, and some guns going down to the last day, and some real close fixtures, but also a fair few blowouts as well. So we had a nice mix, and not too many draws, and some better cricket wickets, I would say, so maybe that we had at the start of the season. Now, right, we move on to the standout team in Division 1, and you could have maybe picked up from it from just how I was speaking about them. I said Somerset for the last couple of weeks. I think their win at Nottinghamshire is one of the biggest wins maybe of the season for any team, if that makes sense. Like, I think going away to the champion team of the last season, who are like the reigning champions, if you will, and winning at their place is massive. Nottinghamshire is still in first place, but getting a win at theirs was a big deal. And then they played Warwickshire, who were also in third place, and Somerset are in second, to be clear. Arguably, they played the best 2 teams of the sort of season, if you will, and they came out with a win and a draw from a position where they looked like they could lose. So I think for Somerset, you argue it couldn't have gone much better. Obviously, you could argue they should win at home to Warwickshire, and yada, yada, yada. But quite frankly, they've been really, really in a great position. So that was I think Somerset it's a no-brainer in a way, and their sort of production line of youth talent just continues to not falter. Archie Vaughan started to kind of find his feet, but the truth of it is Archie Vaughan is not the one we're talking about. It's Thomas Rue. I mean, he's just had a ridiculous start to his first-class professional career. I'll get his stats up now. Because it's worth noting, because it is, quite frankly, for someone who's played, he's 18 years old, and within 6 innings, so 3 matches, he scored 409 runs, an average of 81. That means in his 6 innings, he scored more runs than the likes of Dean Elgar, Paul Walter, Helsi Hamid, Tom Clark, Rory Burns, John Simpson, Johnny Bairstow. I mean, I could keep listing names. Tom Wesley, Tom Haynes. Some really, really well-established, brilliant cricketers have played a full 8 matches, 14, 15 innings, and in 6 innings, Thomas Rue has gone past their totals for this year. I've kind of skipped ahead without sort of signposting, because the standout team is Somerset, and I think it was a really clear standout team. We're moving now on to the standout players for Division 1, and as you might have noticed and you might have guessed, the player I've chosen is Thomas Rue for batting, and as the batter. He wicket-keeped in one of those games when James Rue was playing for England, and the other game he just played as a specialist batter. in that first game against Nottinghamshire, he scored 68 in the first dig and 127 not out in the second dig. Again, Nottinghamshire, you could argue, have the best bowling lineup in the country. And I'm not going to say he made it look average, but at point, some of the shots he was playing against bowlers like Brett Hutton, Fergus O'Neill, which is filled with arrogance, but also so much brilliant technique. Like, batting coaches would watch it and go, that's just perfect. Even when he's walking at them, his head is so still and all of these sort of things. And, for cricket, badges, nerds, whatever you want to call us, his just innings were quite, mouthwatering, if you will. And then, he followed it up in a situation where Somerset needed runs badly in a second innings. He scored 35 in the first innings against Warwickshire, so not nothing to write home about, if you will. And then in the second innings, they needed runs to sort of set up a position where they could, try and set a target for Warwickshire, or just set themselves in a position where they could struggle to lose. Him and Craig Overton came together, put it together. Probably it must have been a double hundred partnership. And Thomas Rue scored 149. They just fell short of that 150. I'm sure he will have plenty of opportunities to go past 150 in his career. Bear in mind, he's 18 and is already averaging 80 in the county championship. So that's my standout batter from the past 2 weeks. Thomas Rue, I think, again, a bit of a no-brainer in many ways. On to standout bowler. Now, this was the one I actually struggled with more, just because there was like a lot of people who had like good few weeks. Fergus O'Neill, for example, and his batting really helps him, but he had a brilliant couple of weeks for Nottinghamshire. There was a few others, but again, and I feel like every 2 weeks I end up talking about this man, and I've already mentioned him. Carl Abbott had a ridiculous, ridiculous game against Sussex, 9 wickets for 54. But even against Surrey on the pitch, which didn't do much, and he didn't seem like he did that much, 3 for 76 and 1 for 31 in a draw. And then in a game where there's a real good chance he can get a result against Sussex on a pitch, which was clearly doing a little bit, 6 for 49 in the first innings, and then 3 wickets for 6 in the second innings whilst bowling like 14 overs. It's just remarkable. And when you have someone who has so much control, but also so much threat as a combination as a bowler, I mean, I literally was like thinking about it when I was writing the script for this video and getting it all set up. Is like the way you describe it is the way you have to play Carl Abbott in the county championship is as if Jasper Brummer was bowling in Test match cricket, and like that's as big of a compliment to Jasper Brummer as it probably is to Carl Abbott in a way. But Carl Abbott for county championship side facing against him with Hampshire, especially so like Jasper Brummer in Australia, where there's pitches need fast bowling, and India had a clear drop off to their second and third best bowlers. So it was like Australian batters when they're facing them were really having to think Brummer get through his overs, and then we might score from someone else. So his economy was around 1, sometimes around 0. That seems to be the way that Carl Abbott kind of went against Sussex. Was it just a case of that clearly they just would not trying to score off him because they just knew the chance of him getting him out was very high? And yet he still took 9 wickets and then in the same breath only conceded, 54 runs? Yeah, I've said it enough times at this point. Carl Abbott remains the best bowler in the county championship circuit by some distance. It's a shame that, he's South African in a sense, like many, but he is just a brilliant cricketer. And I guess for Hampshire's sake, long may it continue. But I think, as I've said about Hampshire a few times, how reliant they are on Hampshire, Carl Abbott is quite remarkable, really. But yeah, if you're a Hampshire fan, if he's fit all the time, which he pretty much always is, it's a great player to have in your dressing room and a great player to have on the pitch. Now, finally, another player I've already mentioned whilst we've been doing the sort of the results bit and the standout team bit, the all-rounder for me, standout all-rounder for the last 2 weeks, it is Craig Overton. So in the first game they played against Nottinghamshire, so obviously the same games that Thomas Rue was playing in, he got 0 and 20 with the bat, so obviously nothing really there. But then 2 for 35 in the first innings, and then a game-winning 5 for 29 in the second innings against Nottinghamshire. So that's obviously huge in and of itself. A brilliant performance, 7 wickets in a winning game against top of the league. Huge enough as it already is. Then in the second match of the 2 weeks, they play Warwickshire. He only scores 2 in the first innings, but then, as I've mentioned, in regards to Thomas Rue, he scored 111, and mostly in partnership with Thomas Rue. Really a game-saving innings and a really big moment for their season, I'd say. I think if Somerset will go on to do well, and again, they've got the longest drought for a Division 1 title, but they're also the team that stayed in Division 1 the longest at the moment. So it's one of those where moments like that in the season, you go, okay, here we are, we're sort of trending in the right direction, and I think that is true of this Somerset side. He also got 2 for in the first innings and then didn't bowl a huge amount in their fourth innings. I think it was kind of clear probably that it was going towards a draw, and they probably didn't want to risk any sort of injury for Craig Overton, which you can very much understand when he's having the season that he's having, and we'll get onto that in a minute. Anyway, it's time now for the County Chat 12. As I sort of say, it is always my favourite bit. I quite enjoy the kind of weighing up what's more important, this many runs or a few extra wickets if they're an all-rounder, or if do you value having specialist openers, or as is becoming a bit of a custom with the County Championship, middle order players are often scoring a lot more of the runs. So bit of an interesting sort of weighing up the two things there. My poster's just unstuck itself. Nice. Anyway, let's get onto some screen sharing for... Here we go. Right. So as you might straight away see if you're watching, but I will obviously start listing if you're listening. The openers have changed, and we always do here on the County Chat the little Roman numerals, because I'm pretentious and I enjoy Roman numerals, I guess. But basically, 2 new openers come straight into the team this week. We've got Dom Sibley and Daniel Hughes. Now, Dom Sibley is a case of you kind of always know what you're going to get. He's so consistent. He scores so many runs. But yeah, in the last few weeks, he's just sort of slowly moved his way up the run scoring charts. And now he's in 4th place for runs, 690 runs in his 14 innings, averaging 57. Just all very normal Dom Sibley things. But it's his first appearance on the list because he hadn't had like the biggest start to the year. Then you've also got Daniel Hughes has moved into the team as well for the first time. As a Sussex fan, it's funny. I wouldn't even really been like he's having so much better of a season than Haynes, but he kind of is if you just look at the numbers. And he's in 5th for runs, effectively joint with Jake Lehman on 666. All a bit spooky. The 2 Aussies on 666. Don't read into that too much. Anyway, the averaging 44, which is nothing crazy for the top of the run scoring charts, but a strike rate of 62. He gets always often off to Sussex. Him and Haynes often get Sussex off to very good starts. And again, I went a little bit heavier this time whilst making the list, as I kind of referred to as I was talking about it. Is that I've got a little bit heavier on maybe having 2 openers, specialist openers, but sort of Hughes and Sibley made that quite clear. And I'm imagining again the idea of this being a sort of all-star team. I kind of imagine those 2 opening the batting together would be quite a good combination, if you know what I mean. Kieran Carlson stays in the team. He actually had a leaner sort of couple of weeks, having had a really, really good couple of weeks before that. He scored 15 and 32 against Sussex, and then 1 and he got 67 against Surrey in their second innings, which was a very important 67, which was kind of game winning. It was also, and much more importantly, I'm sure to Kieran Carlson, probably the innings that kept him in, probably the innings that kind of kept him in the County Chat 12, and I'm sure he's acutely aware of that. But he keeps the captaincy as well. I think he's actually the only captain in the team of any of the counties, but also. I think how he's led Glamorgan this season, how Glamorgan have looked. I mean, Glamorgan are in 4th, and I predict them to be last, and I think a lot of people predict them to be last. I'm not alone in that miss there. So Carlson also made the step up to 3, as I mentioned in another podcast. If you listen to that one, and I think that's been a massive deal for Glamorgan's prospects this summer, really. Anyway, on to number 4. It's been the kind of most consistent player, but he's also this season, but also just on the County Chat 12 alongside a certain Carl Abbott. But Joe Clark, he just keeps scoring runs. I mean, he had a ridiculous start, but he's also was so far ahead that even his slightly worse innings means he's still massively ahead. He scored 815 runs. The next closest on 788, which is obviously very close, but he's just had a ridiculous season, really. And he has taken the gloves for this week in the County Chat 12, because in the last 2 weeks, he did actually have to keep in one of the games. But yeah, in the last 2 weeks, he's actually not done particularly anything with the bat. 36 and 4 against Somerset, and then 27 against Essex. But he was so far ahead that it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so he's the first of anyone to move on to the IV, which I enjoyed that moment for anyone. And then Tom Abel, another person who was probably on the edge for this list, but the reality was he hasn't played in the last 2 matches. He got a hand injury, I think, during the blast period, which I'm sure is frustrating for him, given how well his county championship season was going. Because in his 6 matches that he's played, he missed the last 2. He scored 696 runs at an average of 77, which means he's still in 3rd place for runs. So that means he's had Sibley, Lehman, Hughes, Carlson, Hayne, a lot of these players who are having really good seasons. Abel's missed 2 matches. He's only had 10 innings, and he's still scored that many runs. So he retains his position in at 5. If he doesn't play in the next 2 weeks, I would assume he'll have to drop off the list. But that is his 3rd time appearing on the list, which is great. Now, I've just mentioned a couple of players who maybe they stayed in off the back of their previous few weeks. Now, if you're watching again, you'd have seen him with his eye next to him. It's Dan Lawrence at 6. He has done the opposite in a sense. He has had the most ridiculous couple of weeks. In essence, I'm now thinking about it. Should he have been the standout batter instead of Thomas Rue? Maybe, but I think Thomas Rue's story is a much bigger one in the sense of Dan Lawrence. I think anyone who watches Dan Lawrence play in the county championship knows just how comfortable and good he is. He only just got his county cap from Surrey, which I quite like from Surrey in the sense of they've really made him work for it because he's been playing well for Surrey for a while now, I would say. But anyway, against Hampshire, he scored 218 and then 101. Absolutely dominated that Hampshire bowling lineup on, again, I think as a pitch, I don't think it was like for some of the oval pitches we've had, not but that crazily flat. Against Glamorgan, he actually got 8 and then 0. So kind of it was very much that. One week was a fast, a feast and a famine, as is often said in the cricket vernacular. But yeah, he's slipped into that 6th position, meaning Matt Critchley drops off the list, which was the first time he has done so during this period of time. But yeah, Dan Lawrence, I think, he's moved himself all the way up to 2nd in the run scoring. He's got 788 runs. Quite enjoyable, that whole feast and famine aspect. He's got 2 ducks this year. No one else in the top 5 has a duck. He's also got 0 50s because every time he's passed 50, he's got to 100. He's scored 500s this year for Surrey, and including that double 100, as I was mentioning. So anyway, he slides very nicely into 6, but means that Matt Critchley, as I say, drops off the list. Now, the only other person other than Carl Abbott and Joe Clark who's not dropped off the list once so far is Craig Overton. As I mentioned about his sort of standout player situation, he is having just a ridiculous year. He's 13th in the run scoring chart, so 548 runs, an average of 45. He scored 300s this season. He'd be having a good season for like a middle order batter, or like a very good season for a middle order batter. Like, he's got more runs than James Rue has. He's got more runs than James Coles has. He's had Colin Ingram. I mean, I could just keep listing good batters he's got more runs than. All then coupled with the fact that he is 3rd in the wicket taking whilst taking wickets at an average less than 20. So 19.54. He's got 33 wickets and an economy of 2.48. The last time I did this update show, I mentioned how me and Harry Everett, one of the Somerset commentators, were having a discussion of like in another era, he would be playing probably, or be in these England squads and be playing. But he doesn't fit the Bazball mould, I think it's safe to say. And Somerset are reaping the benefits of that for sure, and he's having a brilliant season with them. Fergus O'Neill jumps onto the list for the first time. He's not played most of the season, but it shows just how good he is that he is already on this list. He's moved all the way up to 9th in the wicket taking. He's played 5 matches rather than 8 for most people, taking 26 wickets at an average of 16 and an economy of 2.68, whilst also scoring runs at like an average of a good average, basically. He scored 285 runs at an average of 57. For a low-order batter, that is just remarkably good. He is such a good cricketer. I've always been a huge fan of him. Sneaks in at 8. Melbourne's finest, or Victoria's finest. Right, this was another one I struggled with. Liam Patterson-White is made the list, and he's, again, as I said, his batting has not been brilliant this year, but his bowling in the last few weeks has shot him up the wicket-taking chart, and there was actually no one who I thought was pushing against him. He's taken 32 wickets at an average of 23.71 this season, and economy of 2.65. This is all whilst lots of the pitches haven't been obviously that suited for spin, and as soon as it was suited for spin against Essex, he bowled Nottinghamshire to victory. I think it's a very well earned move into the County Chat XII, I think for me he should be England's spin bowler in conditions like this, because his control is the biggest thing. His economy of 2.65 is really, really impressive to me, and it should be enough to get him into the list. Ethan Bamber stays on the County Chat XII. I don't think he's had his particularly best couple of weeks. Yeah, he obviously bowled. He just bowls a lot of overs. Only got a couple of wickets and 3 wickets in 1 innings. But still, so far this season, it's hard to take out the person who is 2nd in the wicket takers. He's bowled Other than compared to other pace bowlers, he's bowled about 30 overs more than anyone else. Liam Patterson-White, funny enough, has quite a similar amount of overs, and I'm sure Simon Harper, wherever he would be, has a similar amount of overs. But yeah, he's just a workhorse for Warwickshire, leads that attack brilliantly, and is on 37 wickets, and we're just gone past halfway of the season. So he's doing very, very well, and he's been on the list for the last 2 weeks. Carl Abbott. I think I could wax lyrical about Carl Abbott for days and days and days, and I think I have at this point on this County Chat channel. But I'll just list his stats quick for you. 8 matches, 39 wickets, economy of 2.52 and an average of 16.3. He's got 2 more wickets than anyone else, and because of Hampshire being so poor, he's actually bowled in 3 less innings than almost all these competitors. So if that makes sense, he's had 3 less opportunities to get through 10 wickets, and he's still taken 39. That might not mean much to you if you're not in a sort of a statty brain whatever, but it's one of those where just how impressive that is quite remarkable. And his strike rate is so low, and his economy and average is also low. I'm a big Carl Abbott fan, if that wasn't clear. Finally, in our sort of 12th man spot, our kind of honourable mention, but we do put him on the list, is George Hill. He's having a really, really good season. His bowling last year was so far ahead of his batting, but his batting this year has actually been a lot more like what I think he'd want it to be. 8 matches, obviously, 407 runs, average of 34, a couple of 50s, lots of not outs, doing brilliantly, all whilst combined with being the 6th leading wicket taker, 27 wickets, an average of 23 and an economy of 2.88. It's kind of wrestling between him and either Matt Critchley or Jake Lehman for that 12th man role. But I think George Hill is so clearly the other all-rounder. Matt Critchley doesn't bowl enough to be an all-rounder, and his batting just kind of dropped him off the list. We'll speak of the people who've obviously dropped off the list. There's quite a few. Ben Slater, Ben Duckett. Obviously, Ben Duckett was playing for England. Ben Slater just had a lean few weeks. James Rue, again, went into the England squad, and in the one game he did play for Somerset, didn't get as many runs as he had been. Matt Critchley drops off the list. Again, more of a virtue of his bowling. He's just not bowling enough to be that kind of all-rounder, and Dan Lawrence bowls a lot and also flew past him on the run scoring charts. And then Sam Cook, had a really good season, has just missed the last 2 games with a knock. And then Jake Lehman, I put him here and here because he's on the honourable mentions and dropped off the County Chat 12. I felt very harsh him not being on the list. He was the one I felt the worst about because he is 5th on the run scoring with joint with Dan Hughes, as I mentioned, and he played in 1 less game. But it's just one of those things. I just couldn't find a way for him on, but he was on the list last week. Ben Green's having a good season. Just his averages are quite high because, again, he's having to bowl a lot of overs in Leicestershire teams where they're basically not often doing that brilliant. But again, he's gone per 30 wickets in just over half a season, so that's a great effort. Sam Hain, as I mentioned, he's just the model of consistency. Any Warwickshire fan will mention it, and he's having a very good season. Another batter who's doing well, Jack Haynes for Nottinghamshire. Just consistently getting runs in that middle order. And then finally, the other honourable mention was just another opening batter. Rishi Patel for Leicestershire is having a very good season, again in a Leicestershire batting lineup, which has been faltering. Anyway, as often is the way, I've whittled on for a little longer than I usually would want to. So this is it for us here in the County Chat update show, I guess. We've got about halfway through the season. We'll keep doing these as the season keeps going on, and any talking points and all of that stuff. But if you enjoyed the episode, I really hope you did. Leave a like, a sort of rating, a comment if you've got anything to say. Maybe a player who's missed off the County Chat 12, or you're, just got something to say. And I'm very, very much happy to respond. I always love hearing what you guys have to say when you do. That's sort of it. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to follow if you're not following. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. And I'll see you all very, very soon.